I got you, didn't I, huh? I got you good, huh? You didn't see that one coming. What am I doing? What am I doing, Shitty? Why am I doing this? This is stupid. I'm so sorry for that terrible opening gag. But you know what? It's all right. Because, hey, guys, it's Tony Wadley II here, back with another episode of Otaku Guam, here to talk all things nerdy with all of you. It's been a while since we've done an episode like this. Unfortunately, none of us could have predicted the pandemic hitting us pretty hard. And unfortunately, we lost a dear friend last year. Our good friend Jovan, the Oddchild Tamayo, passed away last year. And, you know, he was a very pivotal part of this show. For as short as it was, you know, he left a big impact on that episode and a future episode that will be coming. It's the last episode that we shot together, which I will release on the anniversary of the first episode that we made together, just to honor him. And speaking of honoring him, that's what this episode is going to be about too. As at the end of the second episode that we shot, I said to him that we were going to do an entire episode dedicated to horror films because he kept talking it up. And I said, you know what? Just for you, Jovan, we will do that horror show episode. It just pains me that he can't be here to do it with me. But nonetheless, to honor him and to carry on his spirit, we will do that episode that I promised you all those years ago, Jovan. And I hope wherever you are now, you're watching it and you're laughing your ass off at me and Darlene talking about horror films. I know you would have got a kick out of this episode. With that said, as always, we will start off with some news. So I'll talk about some news with you guys. Some interesting anime news, some TV news, a bit of movie news, some thick news. You'll love that. And then I'm going to get into my main topic, which, as I said already, will be horror films. And I have a very special guest by the name of Darlene V. Hill, a very close friend to Jovan. And we'll be talking about things that we like about horror films, things that we don't like about horror films, some of our favorite horror films. It's going to be a riot. And I'm going to close the show off with some recommendations, as well as one more last tribute to our dear friend Jovan. So, with that said, we'll go ahead and dive right into the news. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, time to hit you with the double N's. That's right, you thought I forgot about that nickname. No, I didn't. We're talking nerd news, baby. And the first nerd news we're going to talk about is one that I wasn't actually familiar with, and that is Record of Ragnarok anime adaptation confirmed for this year, 2021. I had never heard of this manga or this anime ever. This is the first time I ever heard that name spoken before or even read that name. And I go, what in the world is Record of Ragnarok? And my producer Kai actually explained to me what the premise is. Basically, the gods are fed up with the world. They are questioning whether or not humanity is worth saving or if there's even anything worthwhile about humanity. And so they're deciding amongst themselves whether or not they want to kill mankind or destroy mankind. But before they move forward on that, they are going to hold a battle tournament where they take some of history's most notable figures and they're going to basically go toe-to-toe against some of the gods. And some of the names on the list are Zeus, Shiva, freaking Buddha is on the list. He's going to be one of the fires, which is kind of confusing because I always thought, you know, Buddha's about nirvana and inner peace. Why in the world would he get into a martial arts tournament? But okay, I'd love to see Buddha get into a fight. Loki's in there, Thor's in there. Of course, Thor would be in there. Ragnarok is mentioned in the title. You gotta have Thor in there somewhere. And on the human side, There's some interesting choice, like Adam of Adam and Eve fame is in there. Nikola Tesla is in there. King Leonidas. I'm not gonna lie, guys. After just hearing this premise, I'm even more excited to see this anime or even read its manga. That sounds like an enticing premise that is gonna be like action freaking packed. It sounds like a lot of fun. So thank you, producer Kai, for introducing me to the world of Record of Ragnarok. So the anime will be coming out sometime this year. The date is not being confirmed, as at least from the news story that I've read. It just said spring 2021 or maybe summer. So either the summer season or the spring season. Either way, it's coming soon. Pretty damn excited. So the next news story is one that I personally am excited for. So they just announced this week that they are reviving Clone High on HBO Max, and they're giving them two seasons. So some of you are either too young to remember Clone High or just never heard of Clone High because it's one of those obscure cartoon shows that no one ever talks about. But I freaking love Clone High. And you guys might even love it too, because the guys who created Clone High are the same guys responsible for Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, 21 Jump Street, the Lego Movie, and even Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Phil Lord and Chris Miller, you know how they got started? They got started on this very TV show. And the guy who created Scrubs is also a co-creator on the show as well. I remember when I first heard about Clone High, I found a random clip of it on YouTube, and I was like, what in the world is this? I watched all 13 episodes, and it was hilarious, fantastic, original for its time. The art style was kind of weird. It's kind of strange, the animation style, the character designs. But basically the premise is there's this evil organization. They get the DNAs of all these historical figures. Actually kind of fitting that we talked about Record of Ragnarok and we're talking about Clone High. It's practically the same premise, minus the gods and a fighting tournament. An evil corporation government gets the DNAs of all these famous historical figures so that they can make an army of them to take over the world. But they're doing a test run so far, and now they're all teenagers and they're going to high school and they have their teen angst. It's silly, it's ridiculous. Gandhi is a main character. Abraham Lincoln's the main character. Cleopatra's in it. Joan of Arc is in it. JFK is in it. And I'm just kind of curious to see like what they're going to do with this new season. And if it says here that Phil Lord and Chris Miller are going to be involved, they will write the pilot of the revival, which is just having them involved means that this is going to turn out fantastically. I cannot wait to see what they're going to do. I hope they reference how the first season ended, because it ends in a very strange way that also made me laugh. But I'm just excited again to see Clone High. Finally, after it ended in 2003, this is damn near 20 years later, and we finally get this revival. I hope they bring back the original cast. I hope that, they don't miss a beat. I'm excited to see it. Just don't screw it up. Don't screw it up. The next news story I'm going to share with you guys is that the Attack on Titan second to last, not the very last one, but second to last chapter has a release date, and it will be coming out on March 9th. March 9th. If you're caught up on the manga, holy hell, what is going on? No spoilers. No spoilers. But it's getting crazy, guys. It's getting hella crazy in the manga, and I'm just losing my mind about what is happening right now. And I'm just like, how is this all going to end? Like, just where they are at this point in the manga that I have read so far, how is this all going to end? What is the end game? I'm so entranced by it. I know most of you are probably watching the anime right now. The anime is far behind. You still got so much more to go. But from what I've read so far in the current chapters, it's getting balls to the walls insane, and I'm loving every second of it. I can't wait to see this second to last chapter, and I hope that the last chapter comes very soon. I need to know how this is all gonna end. And the last bit of the double N I'm gonna share with you guys today deals with our Lord and Savior from King Kong, Godzilla. As Netflix is releasing a new Godzilla film called Godzilla Singular Point, which this is the first time I'm hearing about it, but apparently they just revealed a full redesign of Godzilla. And might I say,
damn, boy, he's thick. Boy, that's a thick ass boy. Damn.
That boy is thick with triple, quadruple, 5, 6 C's at the end, man. He is thick. I don't even know what to say. This has to be the thickest Godzilla I have ever seen. Most Godzillas, he's really tall or he's really fat. This Godzilla, man, that boy got a badunkadunk like you have never seen. Look at the, man, seriously, look at those thighs. Really look at them. God, they are so thick, boy. That's all I gotta say about this news. That boy thick. Anyway, so that's all the nerd news I got to share with you guys today, but I'm sorry, I'm still distracted by how thick this boy is. Whew. Sorry, I gotta compose yourself, Tony. Anyway, so that will be it for the nerd news this time around. And now we will go ahead and dive into the main topic, horror films. So stay tuned. Now, ghouls and gals, it's the moment of truth. We finally have gone to the main topic here on Otaku Guam, and that, of course, as I mentioned earlier, is about horror. Both film, anime, maybe TV shows, or manga, and I couldn't have picked a better person to have this conversation with than a good friend of mine and someone that has been very helpful to my growth here on Guam, both as a performer and as an educator. Is that there Darlene V here?
Jazz hands for the horror special?
No, don't do jazz hands. You do stabby hands. That's what you do for the horror aficionados. So it's so good to finally have you on Otaku Guam podcast, Darlene.
Thank you for having me.
So maybe introduce yourself to those who have not or who are not familiar with you, especially because you work in the background when it comes to all of the conventions that we do here on Guam. So yeah, this is your 15 seconds of fame. Or I guess not even 15 seconds. Let's make it 30 minutes of fame. There you go.
I can't talk that much. So my name is Darlene Vigil. I actually do work for Kai Productions, but like Tony said, I'm mainly in the background. I don't really do much of getting in your face or anything like that. I pretty much tell Tony what to do. And Felix, but he's behind the camera right now. But we are responsible for bringing a ton of events to the island, especially certain demographics like those who are into anime and geekdom, if you will. So yeah, what else? I'm a mother. One of my favorite genres of all kinds of movies, it definitely has to be horror. And I guess we're just gonna dive into that a little bit more tonight and stuff. So I hope I don't bore you to death or anything like that.
Dar, if there's one thing you are not boring. And I just have to say, this woman, like, we would not be sitting here, honestly, had it not been for Darlene Vigil over here. Oh. Like, I gave a lot of props to Felix, and Felix deserves a lot of props.
Yes, he does.
In the first episode that I did. But it's almost like these two are a package deal. If it wasn't for them, Otaku Guam wouldn't be here, Recon wouldn't be here, I would not be as successful as I am. So again, Dar, I don't get to say it as much, but seriously, thank you for everything you've done for us. Thank you for being in the podcast, and just thank you for being you, honestly.
I appreciate it. We really do it for the fans. Mm-hmm. I mean, if it wasn't for this I don't know if you want to call it this hunger to want to do events that are not necessarily drag racing, and no offense to that, and something that's not necessarily sports. We cater to those that just want to sit in a corner and read manga. We do big events. Hopefully this COVID will just go away so we can continue to do these kind of production events.
Just keep spraying disinfectant, just like
If
how
you
we
can
do.
see right here, this thumb is suffering from hand sanitizer syndrome.
It's funny, your thumb is doing that, my trigger finger is doing that, because I go every time after I finish a class. Just so it just
Absolutely, absolutely.
it's almost horrifying that we have to do this on a daily basis. And speaking of things that are horrifying, let's jump into our topic.
Sure.
Now, I already told you this, and I believe I've told you guys this already too, but we're doing this episode to honor our dearly beloved friend who's no longer with us, Jovan Tamayo, the Oddchild. This was actually a segment that he wanted to do. In fact, it was supposed to be the next episode after we did. There's going to be a second episode, which I will release on the anniversary of the first episode that we did. And after that episode, we were supposed to do this episode. And since she was the closest to Jovan, it's only proper that we have her here to talk about a subject that he was really passionate about, horror films.
Right.
And we will honor him tonight
Oh.
by having this discussion. So what should we begin? We should begin talking about just in general horror. How would you define a horror film, TV show, anime, what have you? What defines a horror to you?
You know, I think for me personally, any horror fan would have seen all types. You know, horror film is not just horror. You've got all kinds of categories of horror. But I think
A lot of hybrids.
a lot of hybrids. Yes, we were talking about that earlier. But I think what makes a horror film is, at the end of the movie or film, you're sitting there thinking, man, that's a lot of dread right there. I wouldn't want that to happen to me. So I think anything nowadays, it's a little bit different than when it was in the 80s. In the 80s, it was blood and gore.
I literally thought you were going to say at the end of the horror film, or at the end of every horror film, you have like that surprise jump scare, like everything's fine. That. Ugh.
Comedies are tending to do that too.
We'll get to that soon.
So for me, a horror film is something that gets me thinking.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like what if that were me? Personally, I prefer the psychological horror films over the blood and gore because, okay, I'm not trying to say anything, but blood and gore is kind of unrealistic for me. But ghost stories, anything with the paranormal, is definitely something that's going to frighten me. In fact, my father, he used to say things like, "Oh, you better stop watching that Poltergeist because that character is going to jump at you and you're going to get possessed."
Especially here on Guam, where we believe in the Tatamona and everything.
Absolutely. Yep,
you know,
yep.
we take spirits very seriously. In fact, a good friend of mine who you have never met named Shimmy, she loves the paranormal. Don't you, Shimmy? Don't you love the paranormal? Speaking of that, though, going on the idea of like the hybrid type of horror experience, do you think, in your opinion, that there is a difference between like genuine horror film and a suspense film? Like, do you see a difference between the two, or do you think they're kind of one and the same? They kind of go hand in hand with each other?
Man, that's a question. I don't know if there's a line that truly divides the two. I think there might be some blur there. It's kind of hard to define what really makes horror a horror and what makes suspense. When I think of suspense, I think of the slow burn type of horror. Well, you know, in the beginning, it's kind of boring a little bit, but then boom, it just gets at you, and you're like, what the heck did I just watch?
I guess because suspense can be so many different things. It's just, I ask if you think that they're hand in hand, because when most people think of horror, they do mention a film that feels more like it's a suspense film than it is a horror film. And I think of suspense films as high anxiety inducing films, whereas horror, it's like you said, it's like this dreadful feeling, like that panicky, oh my God, what's
already in your
behind the
face.
corner kind of thing.
The music, ominous music.
Exactly.
The tubular bells, which is, by the way, the Exorcist theme song, the tubular bells. Yeah, you know, when you go watch a movie, a horror movie, you already know that if it's a horror film, people are already ready to scream. Which is the reason why I don't go watch horror films on premiere nights.
Really?
Yeah, what would be a good example of a movie that's
Like a good horror film?
like a good horror film that has that suspense also? Because I can't think of one off the bat. There's like a million.
You
of
know
them.
what's the perfect example? And it's fitting because I saw this 2 years ago, and the sequel was supposed to come out in 2020, and it didn't. Well, actually, no, I saw it 3 years ago because it came out in 2018. And the sequel was supposed to come out in 2020. Did you ever see A Silent Place?
A Silent Place? No.
That was one of the best movie-going experience I've ever had in my life, because
write that
it's
down.
one of those few horror films
Okay.
where everyone was so entranced by the entire experience, they shut the hell up in the theater. Because you always have that one person that's always talking, or is really loud, or is making noise with their food, or is on their
Sure,
phone,
sure.
right? The movie itself is so quiet. Even the slightest noise in the theater would, like, you can hear it instantly. So everyone just shut the hell up. And you talk about a mix of horror, anxiety, and suspense. I think A Silent Place would be that very thing. And it even has some of the things that I personally find in a good horror film, which is a compelling story,
Always important.
characters
Yes.
that you can root for, which is it's a small little thing, but it means the world. Because if you don't have characters in a horror film that you root for, why in the world are we here? Why should I care if they make it to the end of the film happily ever after, if you've never took the time for me to really give a damn about them? You feel me?
Yeah, you do actually. You need that humanism.
Yeah. Think of all of the best horror films you've seen.
Right.
You've cared to some degree about those characters, even if it's just slightly, or just because it's like a main character syndrome to a certain degree. You cared enough. But if you have characters, and we'll get to that film in a second,
Okay, I
but
was
if
just
you
gonna
have
ask
characters in a film where you're just like, please kill them, please die, I want them to die horrible deaths, that's a bad horror film. But right now we're on the good horror films, or what makes a good horror film. What about you? What are some things that make a good horror film in your book?
Well, definitely the compelling story. It's got to catch me. Nowadays, they're making movies, or maybe in the old days, because, in the old days, they made like 2-hour horror films like Rosemary's Baby.
Oh,
It was
yes.
a pretty long movie, right?
But
Too
it was
long to get to the point.
It was a good movie, though.
It was
It
great.
was a good
It was
movie.
fantastic. Farrah Fawcett.
Well built. There's even a great build up in that. Like, again, that's another. Okay, there's
Slow burn.
another element right there. Good build up in a horror film.
Right.
Don't just come out immediately with a jump scare or something like that
Right,
at
right,
the
right.
start of your film. Build up to this, right?
Well, let's use the classic The Exorcist. That seems to be everyone's. Well, I don't know about younger people, but that seems to be kind of like the blanket,
go-to standard,
the blanket.
right?
And there's there are reasons for that.
Mm-hmm.
Because number one, it gets you. Okay, you sit there, and it's a little kid.
Yes.
You know what human being is gonna sit there and root compelling characters, right?
Yes.
And is gonna root for this kid to stay possessed. You want that kid to recover, and you are hoping that Reagan gets out of that demonic possession. And then who takes it? The humble priest.
And he jumps out of he jumps out of the window, falls down the stairs.
Right,
Like, oof.
right. So it has to have a compelling. That's a long movie.
But it all paid off at the end because they were able to save the little girl.
Yeah.
And that actually brings up another point about the antagonist in a horror film. And one of my issues with horror films, I feel like I'm jumping ahead. One good element, or an element I find in a good horror film, would be an antagonist that is menacing, threatening, but defeatable. Like, you can beat them if you either find their weakness or if you outwit them. Basically, the threat itself is not something that cannot be thwarted. I mean, at that point, why am I even watching this movie if I know
Right.
that the villain can't be defeated?
Yeah,
There's no
exactly.
It gets rid of that sense of dread and that sense of tension if you know that the villain can't be stopped.
Right.
So
And you always want a victory.
yes,
Even in a horror film, you always want a victory nonetheless. The movies that don't have victories, man.
exactly. It's called catharsis. You need a
Right.
catharsis. You need that ending where you go, whew.
Well, you're speaking about the antagonist always being menacing, threatening. But come on, in any story, there's a reason why the antagonist is menacing, is
Of course,
threatening.
yes.
Let's look at Jigsaw, right? And I'm jumping ahead here, but in the beginning, when you were watching Saw, I remember watching it. And I'm like, man, who is this guy? Go and cut him up. But when you hear his story, especially throughout the film series, it's like, this man just wants everyone to kind of appreciate what they have. I mean, yes, it doesn't, I don't condone that kind of behavior, but it's
A sympathetic
Right.
antagonist. That's brilliant.
I
Exactly.
think most, if not all, antagonists in any story, especially in horror, have a reason to do what they have
Yes,
to
you
do.
gotta give them a reason to their actions, and something that the audience can kind of go, oh, okay, I kind of see where they're coming from. You don't. It's kind of like what made Avengers, Infinity War, and Endgame work.
Yes.
Because while you're not rooting for Thanos, you see where he's coming from and you understand his motives, and that's what makes a compelling villain. I think what made Jigsaw such a compelling villain is that, to a certain degree, I mean, I'm gonna be honest about a bit of my mentality, but like, I kind of agreed with them to a certain degree that people did not appreciate their lives and they were throwing it away. When you're damn near at death's door and you see people basically flaunting what you are about to lose, of course it's gonna piss you off.
But Tony, you ain't gonna give me no chainsaw
Oh, I'm not
if I
gonna
ever
make
make
you
you
cut your
mad. Like,
foot
you know,
off.
Dar, I don't like that time when I asked for pepperoni pizza and you didn't give me pepperoni pizza. You cut your own arm. Come on, Tony.
I asked for
No,
sausage pizza.
no on Jigsaw, but I do understand where he's coming from. Even the ghosts, like in any ghost story, The Conjuring. You know, I actually like the Lorraine and Ed Warren stories. So if you're not familiar with Lorraine and Ed Warren, they are these demonologists. Lorraine Warren passed away, I think, in 2019.
She passed away recently?
Yes. No, well, yeah. Well, first it was Ed Warren, and, you know, they were demonologists. And if you want to, before you Google it, you know, you're looking at the, I'm going to mispronounce this because I always do, Amityville Horror.
Amityville Horror?
Is it the Snedeker family? I'm not too sure. Yeah, the stories from The Conjuring, and then the beautiful Vera Farmiga, she plays Lorraine Warren. So any story that has a ghost or a paranormal activity, there's going to be a reason why those entities exist.
It's funny you mentioned Paranormal Activity, because that's another thing I think that makes for a good horror film is not being over reliant on cheap thrills or tricks.
Jump scares.
Jump
yeah.
scares
Blood and
or
gore.
blood and gore or, you know, twists and things like that. Because, I mean, again, I feel like we're jumping a little bit ahead, but like there is a huge reliance on that, especially in modern horror, where, okay, we have to make it bigger, scarier, and what's that? Okay, more jump scares, more bombastic scenes, more brutal scenes. And I'm like, sometimes it doesn't need to be so brutal. Let the atmosphere build. Like, that's why I said A Silent Place is a perfect example of this, because I wouldn't say it was very reliant on jump scares. What it was working on is the fact that it's so quiet that it's building this tension up.
It's like the psychosis
right?
that's going on.
And every single movement has you on edge, because one false move or one dropped glass and those creatures will go woof and they come and like they take you.
Wait, is that similar to A Quiet Place, the one with Sandra Bullock? Or is that, am I talking about a different movie? That's the bird thing, right?
Wait, oh, you're
that
talking
out.
about the bird? What was it called?
You know, the blind bird. What's it, that blind?
Felix, what was that movie called?
Forget it. Cut that part.
No, what?
What's it?
I can't hear
Birdhouse.
you, Shimmy. Speak into the microphone. Bird Box. Bird
Oh,
Box.
Bird Box. Oh, Quiet Place.
Wait, where'd you get Bird Box
Hold on,
and Quiet Place?
Wait, is A Quiet Place the one about the family? And then
Yes.
the son and the father, they were on the bridge, he dropped a toy.
Yes.
Okay, A
Then you
Silent
have-
Place. I knew it as A Quiet Place.
Wait, was I call? I've been calling it A Silent Place this whole time? Well, I guess we can't change it now. It's gonna be a
Silent Place forever.
It's A Silent Place now.
Well, you're right. You know, I did watch A Quiet Place, and it is one of those movies where it's so tense, it's almost boring, but you don't want to turn it off. You want to see what's gonna happen next. You're afraid for those kids to do normal things.
See, I disagree. I was on edge the whole time.
I was kind of bored,
Like,
but it kept me. But I watched it, so maybe I wasn't bored.
well, I guess
maybe-
it's up to you, because like it depends on what you find boring or what you
Maybe I
would
was
deem
just too
boring.
into it that I wanted to be quiet, so I had to act bored,
What?
right?
That did not logically make any sense to me. Okay, we're moving on, producer. So we talked about some of the things that what would make a good horror film. How about what would make a bad horror film? And we've been kind of tiptoeing towards this and kind of jumping back and forth between the two. But I'll let you start that off. What do you think makes for a bad horror film or horror show, anime, a horror experience?
I think what makes a bad horror film is just the plot development. It's just not a lot of plot development. It's not compelling enough.
So the story being weak.
Yeah, exactly. You got characters that are predictable.
Yes.
Predictable plots. And yes, there's always going to be that argument that predictable plots are already a bad move. But sometimes it's not. But in a horror movie, it cannot be predictable.
If the point is to play off of the predictability of the situation, or if it's predictable but engaging enough, then then you can let it go.
Right.
But when it's just predictable and it brings nothing new to the table and it's just boring.
Yeah. Too many jump scares. One of the things I notice about films nowadays, or back when I used to go before the COVID, was whenever you heard. And everyone's been through this, right? You're watching a horror film and then you hear the scary music and then it's just a glass of water. And then you're like,
Or no, the fake outs. Remember the fake outs?
Yeah, that's what I'm
where
talking
you're
about.
like, someone's like, what's that over there in the hallway? Let me walk down, and then someone like grabs them from behind, and you're like, it's just me. And I'm just like,
yeah, and then they
what?
wait for you. They wait for you to just calm down, and then right when you calm down as an audience member, boom!
You know what was one of the funniest and most ridiculous jump scares I had ever seen in my life?
Okay.
I was watching this movie, and I remember this because I was like in high school, about to go into college. It was a movie called The Devil Inside. It was playing off of the whole found footage gimmick.
Oh, yeah.
And so it's this lady whose mom has gone crazy. Like she I don't even remember exactly what the plot was, but I remember there's this scene where they're like walking down the street, and all of a sudden you go, and it's just, the jump scare was a dog barking.
That's pretty
scary.
scary.
Dog barking. And I'm just like,
That sounds so stupid.
I'm like, F you, movie? Really? That is so cheap.
You're talking about the dumbest jump scare, okay? What is the best jump scare? Because I have mine, okay?
The
But I
best
want to hear
jump
what
scare?
your jump scare, your favorite jump scare is. Because man,
Ooh.
still gives me the creeps.
That's a good one. I can't think off the top of my head, but I think the best types of jump scares are ones where they don't rely on a sound to scare you, but there's an image that you see that just catches you off guard, and you kind of do a double take kind of thing. It's like, whoa, what did I just see? What was that?
Right.
I can't think of a specific example off the top of my head of something like that. But there have been many movies where, like, in the background, you see something that's just really eerie. They don't draw attention to it too much, and that always terrified me the most. Because sometimes it's not about the things that you see, it's the things that are off the screen that
Yeah,
you
of course.
cannot see. But what about you? What is the best jump scare you think?
Okay, hands down, it's gotta be from Exorcist 3.
Oh, I know where you're going.
Okay.
I know where you're going.
There's this certain jump scare, and fans, if you've watched Exorcist 3, it's a slow movie.
This was actually one of the longer scenes. Like, it literally drags out.
Yes, and it talks about, I guess they call it the Gemini killer.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's in reference to the Zodiac killer back in the days. And it's the same priest from Exorcist. Should you even call it Exorcist 1? The first Exorcist.
The first Exorcist.
Yeah, Father.
It's a prequel, isn't it?
No, it's after he's been possessed. So, I think,
Really?
or when he's in the mental hospital now, pretty much. I might have that wrong, but the jump scare is like they're in the nursing ward.
Yeah, and it's just this one long take.
Yeah, and it looks
just
like the
keeps going
Scooby-Doo.
and
Like if
going.
it's got that Scooby-Doo hallway thing where people are crossed and it's just a nurse. You don't think anything of it. There's no music, no ominous music.
Nothing's happening.
Yeah, she's just putting the plates down on the lab cart, and then she's walking this way, and then here comes this guy with a big hair, and then it shows the picture of a saint, a statue with the head cut off, like in an
Brilliant
instant.
editing.
1 minute, but that whole like whatever you call it, footage.
I loved how we jumped all the way to like a good jump scare after mentioning some bad jump scares.
Right.
But like seriously, like it's when they resort to these cheap tricks or these cheap thrills, these things that are like, okay, we just need to startle them. You're not scaring the audience, you're startling them. Because anyone can get startled by a loud noise.
Sure.
Or by something just popping out into the screen. But you didn't scare them. You just like, you got me kind of thing, right?
It's almost like a haunted house kind of feeling.
Yeah,
They make
it feels like a thing, like an amusement park ride, right?
Yeah. One thing that Jovan, one of the last things that Jovan has, like speaking of horror films, he recommended this film to me. It's called Calviar Under Our in Defeat. It's a Belgian film, so of course it's not in English. So I said, okay, I'll take you up on that. Let me watch it. But he warned me. He said it's not going to be the most exciting film, but I want you to watch it because it's one of my favorite horror films. Okay, I think he has his own, but Jovan likes everything in horror. I watched
He's eclectic.
Yes, he is. Yes, he is. And I'm sure he's sitting, he's watching us, right? And I was like, you better do me some justice, Dar. But after I watched this film, I texted him right away and I said, what the heck did you just show me? Because I couldn't believe what I was watching. It's about a man. He's a performer. He performs at elderly centers or senior centers, and he's like a cabaret performer. So he goes off into a different city for a tour. His truck breaks down. I think it's kind of predictable, right? Then of course he meets some people, and they take him in. But there's a lot of weird things, and there's this certain part where, you know what? Just watch it.
You're not gonna spoil it.
I can't, because even if you were to ask me what is it about, I can't tell you. And I don't know what Jovan was trying to do to me, and his only response was, "Did you like it though?"
I was about to ask you, did you like it?
Yeah.
You have to hesitate to think of your answer. I don't know if you liked it.
I think I did, and I want to watch it again so I can get over the shock factors.
That's gonna be the next Kai production meeting. We're gonna watch that film together.
Right.
But what other things also do you think make a bad horror film? So we mentioned cheap thrills. We mentioned about the jump scares, but like excess gore, which is what killed a lot of the Saw films.
You know what I think is another one? Blood and gore. If there's too much of that, I don't like it already. It becomes so disgusting, almost offensive.
Yes.
Okay.
Like only seeing creepy imagery and blood and gore is gonna make me terrified? Come on. You gotta try harder than that.
What about the constant remaking of films? What do you think
I
of
was about
that?
to ask you about that too, because you mentioned, we were talking earlier, you mentioned REC. REC, which is actually the original Spanish version of the remake Quarantine. And most people did not like Quarantine because they saw REC. I didn't see either one.
Which one was original?
REC, the Spanish version. And then they remade it into Quarantine. Most of the times, the remakes are just awful. They're not as good. Just look at all the remakes of Japanese horror. They just can't capture the same spirit and the same horror, the essence that made those films scary.
But could it be because it's a different, now that we're speaking about foreign film, you look at Ring, you look at The Eye, those are all adaptations from foreign film. The Grudge. Right, The Grudge.
Ju-on,
right? They don't, I'm going freedom on this one, but they don't look at censorship so much as we do. We have the FCC, to kind of regulate what we can show on film.
I don't think it's about the censorship. I think it's just they fail to capture the spirit, and they just think, oh, this was a scary, popular horror film. Let's cash in, kind of thing,
And then they put these A-list actors into them.
Yes.
Right.
Like your Sarah Michelle Gellards and everything.
You got Jessica
Naomi
Alba.
Watts.
Naomi Watts?
Yeah, she was in The Ring. She was the woman in The Ring.
Oh.
Yeah. The
very
girl who voiced Lilo is the little girl, by the way.
No kidding.
Yeah.
I'll never look at this the same. Thanks for traumatizing me on that.
Another one I have an issue with is like when the villain is so overpowered that you can't do anything about him. Like your Freddys, your Jasons, your Hellraisers.
Your Pinhead, your
To a certain degree, you could even say Jigsaw, even though he dies, and remember, it goes down to the tension and it goes down to the suspense. If there's no suspense about who's gonna win at the end, what does it matter, right? And that even brings me to the last one, bad endings. And horror films are notorious for their bad endings.
Yes.
That Devil Inside movie I talked about had one of the worst endings. Basically, one of their colleagues dies, I think, or someone gets possessed, or the mom dies or something. They're all in the car, and one of the guy who's driving gets possessed, and he just unbuckles his seatbelt and just lets go of the wheel like Jesus, take the wheel, and then they get into a car accident, and then it cuts to black, and he's like, for more information about this, go to this website. I'm like, did you just try to advertise to me in this movie that you made me sit through for 90 minutes?
No good ending.
Just awful. Like, Jesus.
No good ending, just like this segment.
Well, anyway, to wrap it all up, I thought we should end talking about some horror films that you quite enjoy.
Sure.
Ones you would recommend. What do you got?
So I'm a big fan of The Exorcist, The Omen.
Mm-hmm.
I like the series American Horror Story.
Yes.
But I love Castle Rock.
Ooh.
I'm a fan of all the Lorraine Warren and Ed Warren adaptations, Amityville and stuff like that. My favorite slasher, Halloween. I'm gonna be honest, I love Halloween. I love Michael Myers. And what about you, Tony?
For me, geez, the list can go on, but I'm a big fan of Saw, even though I am highly critical about Saw. It was one of my early introductions into the horror franchise. I still think the first one is a classic, and I love the twist. This is before it went over the top with its gore, and it's, it was building all this these gadgets and traps before it went off the hinges like that. I also really liked Alien. You might not think that it is a horror, but the first one is definitely a horror.
Well, that's a hybrid. That's sci-fi.
Sci-fi horror. It's one of the best, well executed, and it was ahead of its time. You talk about having a diverse cast. I've always wanted to say this. It's one of the first movies I ever saw where the black guy didn't die first, and the last three people living were two women and a black dude. All the white guys died first, and I'm like, no one ever mentions that. No one ever mentions that.
No kidding.
Not to mention who's the hero at the end. It's a female, and it's the one no one thought would be the one, right?
And she carries on for the next few films.
Cabin in the Woods is another one. It lampoons the horror genre, and it does it brilliantly. You don't.
No. Yeah. I'm thinking about that. Yeah.
Don't Breathe is another good one that recently came out, produced by Sam Raimi, and he's the same guy that. The guy who directed it was the guy that directed the Evil Dead remake.
Yes.
And I was okay with the remake. However, I think he did better with Don't Breathe because it was original concept and he just freaking killed it.
Right.
But other than that, those are just a few of the suggestions that I had. But to close off, is there any final words you wanted to share with the audience? Any final thoughts?
Well, this is mainly for Jovan. I hope we did him some justice. I'm not much of a commentator, as you can tell. But
you did fine. What are you talking about?
I do love horror. People will always have their opinions. I just kind of tend towards more of the paranormal type of horror film. Mm-hmm. I'm not too thrilled about slasher films and stuff like that. With Jovan, he loved everything. He has his favorite slasher film, and I'm not sure who it is. I think we had a debate about this one night. And of course, when Jovan and I have conversations, they go all the way up into the morning.
Those are the best conversations.
Yes, and I miss that tremendously about him. But this is the episode he would have wanted. Mm-hmm. This is the episode where his spirit, and I was joking around with Ed in the car. I'm like, I don't want to cry. Because if anyone knows, Jovan is one of my best friends. And, I don't know. I miss him a ton.
He could probably be haunting this video.
Oh my God.
Wouldn't that be fitting? Wouldn't that
No, that would not be fitting if he's going to be haunting me. Are you kidding me?
That is so fitting. That is so fitting. Anyway, thank you so much, Darlene, for being a part of this.
Oh man, this was amazing. I wish we had more time to talk because we can go on and on.
Well, you know what? We will always have more time to talk in future episodes. I know make sure you like this video so that you can bring back Darlene Vigil to be in another episode.
We didn't give any love to director James Wan, man.
That's right. You know what? We'll do a whole episode.
No.
We'll do a whole episode honoring James Wan. We have to. We have to.
James Wan, Sam Raimi. Who's the other one?
Alfred Hitchcock too. Don't forget him.
Stephen King. Well, he's
not
mainly
a director.
author,
He's a writer.
mainly a writer. Yes.
But anyway, so that'll conclude the main topic segment. Now we'll go into some suggestions and then we'll close off the show. We'll be right back. Well, guys, as much as it pains me to say it, we finally reached the point where I must bid you all adieu and bring an end to this wonderful and entertaining installment of Otaku Guam. I first like to thank my special guest, Darlene Vigil, for joining me in this episode to talk about horror films and to reminisce about our dear and beloved friend, Jovan, the Oddchild Tamayo. Although he could not be here with us physically, I do feel like spiritually, he still is among us. And as long as we remember him and talk about him and the things that he loves, he'll never leave our hearts. And it was just a pleasure to have her here. Because she doesn't watch a lot of horror films. She doesn't. But she loved Jovan so much and wanted to support him in every endeavor he did, including this show, that she brought herself to be in this show and pay tribute to her dear friend. And so I thank you, Darlene, for coming out of your comfort zone and joining us in this episode. It meant the world to me, and I know for sure it meant the world to Jovan. Because you know he'd be watching this. He'd be watching it from up there. You know that. I also like to thank my producers, Kai and Felix, and especially Felix, who is actually running the cameras right now, and he hasn't dropped it once. Well done. Round of applause for Felix. Round of applause for Felix. Yes. Thank you guys. Thank you. Good job, Felix, on the camera. And also, I would like to thank a new member of our team, Jerome, who is actually running the sound. That's why I sound so amazing, guys. Thank you so much, Jerome. You're doing a kick-ass job already. And welcome to the team. I didn't get to introduce you at the beginning of the show. I have to wait till the tail end, so I apologize for that. But Jerome will be handling our sound from here on out. So it's going to be wonderful. And actually, hopefully, he'll be a future guest too, because I found out me and him actually share a passion for theater and music theater. So, hey, that might be a future episode down the road, huh? Get excited for that, Jerome. So thank you so much, Jerome, for manning the mics and making sure that we sound excelente. And finally, I'd like to thank Shimmy and Rodney for letting us use their wonderful studio and having this lovely decor in the background as well. You know, I mess with Shimmy a lot. I make fun of her. I make fun of Houston a lot, and she really hates it when I do that. But she knows that everything that I do, whenever I mess with her, I always do it with love, don't I, Shimmy? So thank you so much for allowing us to use your space, to use the studio. It means the world. And finally, thank you guys for watching this episode. And I promise you it will not take us another year to make another one. I hope, right? We all agree it's not going to take another year? Don't shake your head like that. It's not gonna take another year, okay? We'll have another episode out at least by next week. All right? You can put my money on it. Anyway, I've been rambling too much. Thank you guys for watching this episode, and as always, I'll see you on the next one. Peace.